Hi, I'm Jeff Diederich, Chairman of the Williamson County Republican Party. I'm here today as part of our Meet Our Candidates series, an interview with Congressman Mike Bost. Congressman, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Jeff. Thanks for having me on here.
Well, very much appreciate you taking the time to be here. We have several questions for you today.
All right.
I'd love to dive right in, and I want to kind of hit you with some facts first, if I could. Your early life: graduated from Murfreesboro High School, attended the University of Illinois, completing the Certified Firefighter II Academy, served in the United States Marine Corps, ran your family's trucking business for 10 years, served as a treasurer of Murfreesboro Township, served as a trustee for the Murfreesboro Township, served on the Jackson County Board as a state representative in the 115th District for over 20 years.
For 20 years.
And have been serving in the United States Congress since 2015.
Right. Running for my fourth term.
Running for your fourth term. My question to you is, what do you do in your spare time?
I have that lovely wife of mine, which you know, Tracy. We have 3 adult children, 3 wonderful in-laws with them, and 11 grandchildren. So my time is usually trying to spend time with those grandchildren, but there's not a lot of spare time. A lot of people don't understand that in Congress, unlike state rep, you're there half a year and then you're back in district. I try to get home on the weekends. In a normal year, a non-COVID year, we are in D.C. If you go in on a Monday, you usually come back on a Thursday. If you go in on a Tuesday, you come back on a Friday, and sometimes it's Monday through Friday. Maybe 1 week a month. On some months, you get to come back home, and then August, you're back in district. But other than that,
quite a bit of travel.
You're right, yeah. I know that people know that both you and I are pilots, and when I told them what my first year in Congress, how many miles I had, they said, well, you like that, you're a pilot. I said, not in back. So, yeah, you spend a lot of time flying back and forth.
Sure. Well, we have spent a lot of time together over the years, and during that time, the Mike Bost that I know cares a lot about the work that he does and the people that he serves. But first and foremost, I've come to appreciate your dedication to your family and to your faith. You and your wife, Tracy, have 3 children and I believe 11 grandchildren.
11 grandchildren.
How do you balance your family commitments, and can you describe what your grandchildren think of knowing you as both grandpa and congressman?
Well, let me tell you that there is an age that they finally realize that there's something different about my job. But for the most part, up until the time they're 8 or 10 years old, that's just, why does grandpa leave so often? And my wife Tracy's called Yaya, and Yaya makes up for that time. They spend a lot of time at our house. But understand the age differences in these children now. My oldest is 18. He just went off to Marine Corps boot camp. That's the oldest grandson, and then the baby is 3, and so
it's a pretty good range.
It's a good
ages.
Range, but they're all within 6 miles of the house, so that's good. And I'm just Grandpa Mike, and then when they find out that all of a sudden they said, "Well, you're Grandpa, the U.S. Congressman," they're like, "He goes someplace."
Does that usually come about when they're in school studying?
In school studying. We actually had one of them that. Because it was one of my daughter's children. Matter of fact, it was a Marine, and he wrote about the fact that he was the one that pinned me on my first pin. Because when you were no one but a member can go on the floor unless you're under the age of 12, and then you can go on the floor. And so my oldest was on the floor with me. There's a picture of him pinning my lapel pin on me the first time. And they asked in a creative writing class for him when he was in Carbondale High School to write an experience that he'll always remember. And he wrote about that. And the teacher actually came up to him and said, "This was supposed to be truth, not fiction. You want me to believe your grandfather's Mike Bost?" And he goes, "It is Mike Bost."
That's great. You've made it well known that you take a stance for pro-life. How big of a role does your faith play in your pro-life beliefs?
My faith is probably the anchor by which I hold to my pro-life belief, and it is a case where, my district was one when I was a state rep that included Carbondale, and there would be a tremendous amount of people that would try to pressure me, farther left groups, that would try to pressure me. Well, how about this and how about that? And I just told them it's a thing of faith, and it isn't a case where, you can discuss a tax increase, you can discuss all that, and that's a principle and a way to look at how governments work. But my pro-life stance is a moral conviction. It's one that my wife and I both were involved with early on. We have helped women that they themselves have out of wedlock pregnancies. We've had them in our families. And we back up what we believe, that child is, right there in the Constitution when it says the right to life. We mean life.
Sure.
And we mean from conception on.
So often we see politicians with little experience outside of the political bubble. That is certainly not the situation in your case. How did your experience as a U.S. Marine, a businessman, and a first responder prepare you for a life of public service?
Well, here's what we need to know and that's what some people that are the career politicians don't understand, that and people that come up to me and ask, what do I do if I want to become involved in politics? Live life, because we're a representative form of government. And because we're a representative form of government, life experiences, you shouldn't have somebody that's, all the people that there shouldn't be lawyers, all of them shouldn't be poli-sci majors, all of them shouldn't be, but they should have a rounded experience, because quite often when we're dealing with legislation that might affect, for instance, small business or trucking, I have a unique perspective that other people might not have. Also, when legislation goes to 1099 employees, cosmetologists, barbers, everything like that, because of my wife's profession, I understand that. As a Marine, it gave me the opportunity to understand, because remember, I went into the Marine Corps during Jimmy Carter and was there when Ronald Reagan took over, and I know the difference between having someone who just says, the military, we got to have them, but they're not that important, to a president and a Congress that says, we're going to make the investment to do that, which is most vitally important in our Constitution, that is, protect our borders and provide for national defense.
Having spent time with you over the years, I've come to appreciate your resolve in supporting the members of our armed forces. Is that driven more by your patriotism for our country, or did your time serving in the United States Marine Corps also play a large role?
Both. And let me explain why. I represent a district that has a tremendous amount of veterans. And especially, we should always have respect for our veterans. Unfortunately, we've shown over the last couple of years some really sliding away from that. We saw that in the 60s as well. And I was around as a young child watching that occur. And the frustration that I felt whenever my own uncle, who was a Marine, had come home, who had actually been hit in Vietnam and went over at SIU and grew his hair out and watched the people there disrespect anybody who had served. One thing is we have to make sure, one, that we do respect those who serve or are serving, but two, that we fulfill the obligation through the VA, that the obligation that was made to those men and women, so that those things that were offered, some of them have made the ultimate sacrifice, but all gave some. And we need to make sure that those guarantees that are given to them through the VA or through the federal government, through the VA, is fulfilled. And that's why I work with the VA, making sure that we're doing that. That's also why I'm working very hard to try to become the chairman of the VA committee.
Associated Firefighters of Illinois recently endorsed your reelection. Is that a proud moment?
It is. It is. Early on as a firefighter, because I didn't have, I'm talking about when I was a state rep, I didn't have, the first time I didn't have their support because the guy I was running against actually had a pretty good voting record with them. But I've never not had the support of them since. It's a group of friends that I've come to know so well. First responders are that front line. We've known that during the COVID now, whether it's police officers who deserve the same respect as military personnel and our firefighters, and our ambulance drivers and all other first responders, because they're willing to put themselves on the line to make sure that our citizens are safe and taken care of. They spend a lot of time in training. They spend a lot of time away from home. They are those jobs that when the call goes out, their families are kind of wondering, are they going to make it back?
As a man deeply focused on making a difference for the people he represents, can you describe the pros and cons to meeting that challenge as a United States Congressman versus that in which you previously held as a state representative?
Yeah, and it is a big difference. Let me explain that. You're really a lot more hands-on with the local people. And the size of your office is smaller when you're a state rep. It's you and whoever your legislative director is, and then one secretary in the Springfield office, or any volunteers. When you run a congressional office, you go to 720,000 people who you represent, 11 1/3 counties. I've got a staff that runs anywhere from 16 to 19 people, not counting the interns that might be there. You've got a very large budget, and you have 2 district offices, not counting the operation that is in D.C. Because of that, it makes it more difficult to give that one-on-one attention to your each constituent that you would as a state representative. I try to do that as much as I can. One thing I haven't done, and maybe if the people understand this, and I try to pick up, if they have my personal number, it hasn't changed since I was state rep, and quite often it takes me a little while to get back because I do represent 720,000 people. It is difficult from that. But what else it is, it's difficult because we do have certain people that might be transient that don't know Mike Bost, that don't know that I'm willing to serve them, and our office is there and we want to serve you. Instead, they fall, if you're new to the area, a lot of people, or if you're just sometimes a partisan, it's just, you can be bad-mouthed and they don't know you from Adam. And I tell people that, it just kind of runs off my back like water off a duck's back, but my wife always looks up and goes, yeah, I bet, until you come home and then you tell me about it. So
was that a difficult transition for you?
Yeah.
Because I know you're a very hands-on person. You like to get back to your constituents immediately. You've always been responsive to your constituents.
Now,
so that has to be a difficult step, knowing that it takes you an hour or 2 or maybe even longer sometimes to get back now.
And one thing is the advantage we have set up in our office is quite often we hear people say, and it's at the coffee shop or whatever, well, I called his office and they didn't get back. Well, then I can go and check, because there's no, for instance, there's no email, phone call, message, or anybody that comes to the office that's not logged. So if you get hold of our office and they didn't get back to you, tell me what day it was. I can go back and find out why it was that our staff didn't get back to you, or if they, and if they got back to you, because that's vitally important. And whenever they say, well, that's not, they say, well, I don't believe that. Here's where I can tell you that. If you remember the day that Steve Scalise was shot.
Yes.
I remember it like it was yesterday.
Because you were there.
Mm-hmm. And so my chief gets hold of me as soon as I walk through the door, and he says, we've got a problem. And I said, what's that? And he said, the shooter was from our district. And I said, how many times has he contacted us? He said he's contacted us 9 times. He's contacted us 8 times by email, 1 time by phone. I said, is there anything in those communications that would have given us an idea that he was going to do this? He said, no, we've got the FBI coming over now, and we'll give them everything. But he said, we know every communication we had. So it is a case where we do keep track of every communication, but mainly because we're required to by law. But it is a big job from that respect. And it makes it tough sometimes to get hold of people.
One of the interesting parts about your role as a congressman, and more recently over the last several years, your interactions, I think I can sum it up best this way. We've been friends for almost 25 years now. Mm-hmm. It's been a long time. And of all my friends, you are one of the hardest to keep up with. A few weeks ago, we spoke by phone, and you said, and I'll quote, I am flying back to D.C. tomorrow morning. I'll be in my office at the Capitol in the morning, but I have to be in the Rose Garden with the president tomorrow night. He will be formally accepting the Republican Party's nomination for President of the United States for his 2nd term. My question to you is, do you ever sit back and think about these experiences and marvel at the front row seat to what our founding fathers fought and worked so hard to create?
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing. Tracy and I have talked about it so many times and it never stops. I have had the experience of meeting some of the greatest people in the world. I have had the opportunity to meet Benjamin Netanyahu and talk with him one-on-one about the relationship between Israel and the United States. Talked to him prior to then Barack Obama to go entering into the Iran deal, which we were all opposed to. Meeting with two presidents now, not counting the presidents that are if Mike Pence walks into the room, because he's from the House and he likes to come back there quite often, and we'll be sitting around in different meetings and he'll come in. The experiences flying on Marine One and Air Force One, going out and being with our military, and this can go on, and I'm not going to do that to you because I know we were on a time frame here. But as a Marine, to know that I've known personally 3 commandants now, and I wasn't a Marine officer, I was a Marine NCO. And to know that I've actually met them, 3 of them that have been commandants since I've been there, but one, Gerlach, who is actually, if it hadn't been for COVID, wanted to take a group of us over because he's a special envoy to Israel. And he and his father were amazing Marines. And so, yeah, life is, and I'm always amazed, and I know how much God has blessed me and how much the voters have blessed me for allowing me the opportunity to do that.
Without breaching the security of the travels, could you maybe share just a little bit about the experience of traveling to Israel?
Traveling to Israel is one thing, but on occasion, depending on your committees, you do what's known as Codel. They're travel to different countries, and for both diplomatic and for research purposes. With the department, with my committee on transportation and infrastructure, we did what was known as a Denham Codel, which was Denham was a member of the transportation committee, has since been in a California legislator. He's since been defeated, but we put together, and we were at we made 8 countries in 7 days. And
that's a lot of travel.
That's a lot of travel, and in that was included some countries that you got off the plane and you had bodyguards the whole time, because when we went into Jordan is one. But we during that Codel, we went from Andrews to France, France to Belgium back to France to Ukraine to Jordan to Egypt to Israel, and Israel to Ireland, and back home.
So you didn't know where you were waking up?
You just waking up every place and everything like that. So that's another thing that's exciting, but the whole time, is there some really exciting things that you can see during the time, but you're also being briefed on things that are necessary. Without going in, if you're going to Belgium, you can guess where you're going to.
Sure.
So, and if you're near the area, they want to make sure you go by there and get briefed.
I have to assume that it's largely based on the relationships that you develop, and that you're meeting these world figures who we know so well from the media and the news, but you're actually putting those people in front of you and having those relationships.
And for instance, Rodney Davis, I, and the others that were on that one Codel, had the opportunity to sit in the room with the Prince of Jordan. Well, why the Prince and not the King? Well, because the Prince, the brother of the King, is head of the transportation infrastructure. And we had the opportunity to truly discuss what they're working. And what we do find out when we do that is that the relations quite often between Egypt, Jordan, and Israel are not bad as they play up in the media, because they're working together on several projects, including what's known as, and this is not secret or anything like that, it's called the Red Dead, and that is how they are irrigating the valley, the Jordan Valley, and how the crop expansion is occurring, and how all of that is for feeding desert countries is just amazing on what they're doing, and it's special things like pulling water out of the air to do that.
Can you share the details of your relationship with President Trump?
Sure.
And what that has meant to Southern Illinois?
Sure. One is I'm pretty sure that him coming in for an election a couple years ago hopefully helped the economy by the crowds that came in. But the relationship between he and I, let me tell you that his persona on TV is, when you do a reality TV show as long as he did, he kind of, but he truly is that way. Let me tell you what I have learned is that he, as long as you're willing to give him information, he listens closely. He can listen to about 3 to 5 things all at the same time and repeat back everything you're saying at the same time. And that's why it's so unique, the way he's able to handle the presidency. However, he wants you to give good information that he can use to compile with others, and he has zero tolerance for a fool, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. About many years ago, I had the privilege of meeting the president and had a conversation with him. And what I took away from that was that he is a very dynamic personality, but he is a very smart individual. And he processes things quickly and efficiently. And I had the same experience as you described. He has zero tolerance for incompetence.
Mm-hmm. Right. And you know what? I think that's what I need in the president.
I would agree.
And sometimes we might have a personal belief about someone that we would really happy to see them in a certain spot. And either the relationship didn't work out or there was something that came up, and this president will replace them. And then he'll catch heat from the media, but the reality is, whether the media wants to gripe or not, or whether Congress wants to gripe or not, guess what? The Constitution has given him the power to surround himself with the people he feels he can most trust, and not just this president, but any president, because the Constitution says so.
Do you think that the hype that comes from the media revolving around any negativity of the president, do you think that's largely driven by the element of showmanship that he carries rather than based on his competence as a president, as a leader?
Oh, sure, because he will tell the media how he truly feels about them, and I'm pretty sure that other presidents have felt that way about them, but they say, oh, I can't say that. He's never had that problem. And the advantage that this president has is, remember, he didn't need to be president. He was a whole lot better off financially and everything else before becoming president. He's the only person that ever had to downsize the type plane he flew around in. Remember, he didn't do this because he needed the money. He didn't do it because he needed to be more popular. He did it because he believes. And if you've ever sat down and really talked with him, he believes in this nation. And he believes that this nation was headed down the wrong path. And I believe, and I think he believes, matter of fact, I know he believes, and I think many of our local voters and supporters believe that this president has the best interests for the long run for this United States. And I don't know that the other party does.
Having been around the president and his immediate family, can you describe your observations of their relationship and the professional expectations he has for them?
Well, let me tell you, one of the smartest persons I've ever met is Ivanka. And he keeps her as a close advisor. But so with his sons. He's an amazing father with them. But he also trusts them because he knows that he can.
Do you think that trust comes because he has repeatedly tested them in their
Sure.
business acumen
Sure.
in the real world of business?
Sure. But let me tell you, he's done that, and he's grown them into unbelievable business people, each one of them, all of them. And even his daughter-in-laws and son-in-laws, they're good. But let me tell you a story that Ivanka tells, that as a professional woman that she is, and that she runs businesses and everything like that, she said, every day I would call my father. And every day he'd pick up the phone and talk to me about how my day was going and everything like this. And later I find out that, and then he would say, hey, so-and-so's in the room. Can you say hi to them and hi to them and hi to them? These were business meetings where major business was being and instead of focusing right there on that business, he took time to focus on his daughter. And she said, because of that, it puts an anchor into his children that they don't have to question that their father loves them, but also that their father understands business and has trained them up in that way.
Remarkable.
It really is.
The White House has been a symbol of our country's executive leadership. In the early days, one could literally knock on the door of the White House and be heard by those who resided there. Much different today. It still stands as a prominent fixture in American politics and serves as the residence and working space for the president. You are among the select few that have had access to the White House. Can you share your experiences and describe how important the work that occurs within its walls is to this country?
Well, let me tell you, I'll tell you how important it is from one standpoint, and then a lighter side to it too. It is important because let me tell you that many of the people who are now serving with the president in his cabinet are people who I have served with. And when we're working on the details of where the administration is and where we're at as Congress, as long as we don't violate certain rules, and there are still rules, but we can get the information and try to find and work on that find where we can find common ground. And by using our liaison, and the advantage that you have after a few years is when you start getting people that are inside, like Mick Mulvaney and Mark Meadows, who sit with the president every day. And I can call Mick or Mark right now. You want to weigh out what day you're going to call the president. And like I said, the vice president comes over and just comes into the Illinois House, or into the U.S. Congress, and just shows up. And because he came from the House and was a chairman of the House, he feels right at home and hey, the vice president coming over, okay, fine. Or we'll be in a meeting of different groups. There's a group that used to be called the Tuesday group, and one day I was sitting there, and there's only like 8 or 10 of us in the room, and I realized that there's a guy standing at the door with the earpiece. And I looked 2 people over from me, and well, the beep's sitting right there, and I said, "Hi, Mike." He said, "Mike." So, he just comes in. But on a lighter note, for the first time I went into the Oval Office, and many people would have remembered seeing this, the picture of the day that happened. We were working on some issues, and Rodney Davis was known as the whip on some of these issues. And he said, "How are you on this issue for the president?" And I said, "I'm fine." I said, I'm there for it. I said, "But you guys, some of those guys that aren't even in support of this, they end up getting invited over to the White House. Me, I've been here this many months. I haven't been invited over to the White House or whatever." So all of a sudden, he comes over and he says, "Can you go tomorrow? There's a major energy bill or a resolution that the president signed into." I said, "Sure, I'll go." And so about 20 members went over, and we're in the press room. My first time being in the press room. And white wall behind us with panels. We do the press. The vice president introduces the president. President signs the resolution. So everybody's talking. He chases the press out. We're talking back and forth. Many members leave, and there's about 6 or 8 of us left. And all of a sudden, the president goes, "Let's do a picture." And so I start to move over. He said, "Not here." And he takes one of the panels and touches one of the panels, and it opens up. It's a door. And we go down the hallway. And all of a sudden, I'm thinking, where we're going? I mean, it's a little narrow hallway. And all of a sudden, I realize we're in the Oval Office. We just walked into the Oval Office from there. And I'm like, okay, this is my first time being in the Oval Office. And that was the day that he said, "Let's do this picture." He sits down in the chair behind the desk. And I've got my hand on the desk here, and there's others around. And he makes a statement, or somebody says, "Can we get a video of this?" And Priebus was actually still there. And Priebus laughed and said, "Bost already has a video." And everybody laughed. But the president gave a look, and he said, "Never mind, Mr. President, I'll show you the video later." And then he goes, "No." He said, Bost. And he looks up at me, and he just turns his head up. I said, "Yes, Mr. President." He said, "Prayer cards." And Tracy had been the one that had been sending those prayer cards, and we'd been sending them over. And he said, I said, "Yeah, my wife is the one sending those prayer cards." He said, "We need to get a picture with those." He said, "We use those all the time." He said, "Where are those? Where are those?" And all of a sudden, a staffer said, "Over here on the shelf." And we brought that packet over and set it down. And we took a picture with that. And I said, "My wife's going to be so happy." And he said, "I'm telling you, we use them all the time." And I thought, yeah, okay, fine. Instantly, I turned, and I actually ran chest to chest with Mike Pence. And he said, "Mike, he's not joking. There are days that things get bad." And he said, "Prayer cards." And we reach in, and those prayer cards that are written from all over the United States, but funneled through Tracy program, they use those. And so it puts a lighter side to the fact of going in the Oval Office, but also a side of the president that people don't understand.
I think that's missed in the media.
Oh, sure, because it doesn't sell their narrative.
I know you've had the opportunity to travel aboard Air Force One. We talked about it just briefly a moment ago. That aircraft and what it represents is notably recognizable as the mode of transportation for the leader of the free world. Can you describe that experience?
Mm-hmm. Well, first, I've been on it twice, and there are several of them. There's one that's a smaller one, and that was the first one I went on because we had to go through Dubuque, Iowa, and Dubuque's runway wasn't long enough for the big one, and then we went from there to St. Louis, where we went over to Granite City for the reopening of Granite City Steel. That one was nice, amazing because of the experience. They always want to make sure you call someone from Air Force One because it's a process that then you can say you did it. But when we flew from Chicago, that was the larger Air Force One. And well, first off, during the Dubuque, on final approach, I and the congressman that represented the Dubuque at the time went in and had a sit-down conversation with the president. And that was when Ivanka was sitting there in the office there, 2 televisions going. Like I said, whenever I talk about how he pays attention to all around him. Understand there's communication is that he can do anything he needs to do from right on any one of the Air Force Ones. The Air Force One as long as the president's on board. If the vice president's Air Force Two. Then the larger Air Force One, flying on it, the unique situation was I got to fly Marine One to go to Air Force One. But then when we got on board, it's a lot bigger. It's a whole lot bigger. The living quarters for the president is on the second level. The conference room is, and there's a briefing room, conference room, and then the electronics is in there at a real good location to make sure that they're protected and they get all the information to the president, whether he is in his private office, his bedroom, or the conference room, which is where we normally fly. Then the staff has an area where they sit in Air Force One. Then behind that is an area for the press, which is still pretty nice. And just being able to fly in Air Force One, and you really don't feel like you're flying an airplane. You don't feel a lot of the takeoffs. You don't feel you're sitting in chairs. They'll tell you we're getting ready to take off, and okay, fine. And then there's neat little things that, like, there's M&Ms that say Air Force One on them, and
Does the pilot in you just want to take a quick peek in the cockpit?
Yes, but they don't let you do that.
I understand. Congressman, I'd like to talk just a little bit about some of the actual issues that concern the constituents in your district. First, I'd like to talk just briefly about agriculture. The agricultural industry in the United States is vital to our country's food supply. With over 10,000 producers in the 12th Congressional District producing numerous goods, including rice and specialty crops, livestock and dairy products, what is the federal government doing to keep our farmers financially competitive, successful, and in turn protecting the long-term stability of our food supplies?
Well, there's several things. One, the USDA monitors on a regular basis. COVID has done a great job of testing us in this because the supply chain, on getting the supply chain out, was very tough because people were used to going to restaurants, and now all of a sudden they were going to grocery stores. Grocery stores were having a run on them, but the restaurants weren't pushing anything out. So as they got involved with that. But let's take COVID out, and then let's look at what we do. We work, when we see trade problems that occur, we've offset losses for the farmers on a regular basis to try to make sure that our agricultural commodities can stay at a production level so we can continue to feed not only the United States, but we end up feeding the world. Since this president has come in, remember, we've done the USMCA trade agreement, which has been praised by dairy. It's been praised by agriculture. When the negotiations going on with China, even though we have to watch and monitor them, the negotiations that the president pushed forced them into making the large purchases that they needed to make. We were very scared about the markets. We were working with the president, the administration, USDA, Sonny Perdue, who's the secretary, to make sure that our commodities are being produced at the level they can, and that we're trying to make sure they're getting the price that they can get. China, what we've discovered with China, and then this is vitally important to understand, China cheats. And China,
is this through the currency manipulation?
It was both through the currency manipulation, and what they would also do is they would take and they would say to the soybean farmers, we're going to need this much. And they get the soybean farmers ready to plant and everything like that. And then all of a sudden they reduce that and say, oh, no, we're going to need this much. Now all of a sudden they have used their pressure through imperialism, okay, and through someone like tried to do that in the United States.
Cuts the market out.
It cuts the market out from underneath them.
Sure.
Yeah. And so then all of a sudden you have to scramble to try to figure out where those markets are going to come in. So quite often, it's one thing if you're affected by the weather in another country or the weather in your country, but when somebody's trying to manipulate the market like that, that's why it is that this president jumped dead straddle of them. No one has argued with China like this president.
No, they haven't.
And specifically to basically tell an imperialist government that somehow got into the World Trade Organization 35 years ago that you're not going to play these games. And it doesn't matter whether it's steel or agriculture. We also are what's vitally important with agriculture is making sure that we can transport those goods to market. I'm on the subcommittee on commodities. That is when you've got to understand that the baseline for all of our commodities actually comes right out of the state of Illinois, and that is in Chicago. It's what everything is calculated from what it takes from a sale place at Chicago and then based on transportation costs. We have to work with Army Corps of Engineers, especially during times of flood, to make sure we can continue to move, whether it's soybeans, whether it's corn, whether it's rice, whether it's cotton, whatever, into and down the Mississippi to get into foreign markets. These are all things that we have to be involved with, and that's things we're dead straddle on.
That leads me right into the project that we have with the port project in Cairo. So that appears from our conversation that would be a pretty integral part of
it is.
Those
and
efforts.
Here's the important part of that. Not only as a member of the United States Congress, but understand I and the state legislators, well, Brandon Phelps before he left, and others worked to move that language through before I left the State House. And now, let me tell you that our state representatives and our state senator now have been doing a great job of making sure that we move forward with the projects to put a port where that port needs to be when those two rivers, the greatest rivers in the world, the largest two of the largest rivers come together at that point. That should be a hot spot of commerce. It has some commerce, but over the years that has slipped by the wayside. This port should be something that should springboard us in an opportunity to make sure we're able to get the grain out, and not only get the grain out, but get other commodities out as well, or other products.
Outside of the agricultural aspects of it, it will revitalize undoubtedly a community that is
that needs
desperate
it terribly.
need of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's hard to believe that in looking at Cairo, and we've been down there trying to help, whether it was the debacle that occurred with the Alexander Housing Authority whenever I first came in, and where people should have went to jail. But we worked hard with that. Now we have a nursing home issue down there that we've tried to help with. And let me give credit where credit's due. It has been a both bicameral and bipartisan to try to help. But you've got a community that we don't know what the census is going to say that they're actually at. Are they going to at 1,800? Where at one time they were 18,000. Why in the world at a major crossroads like that the community shouldn't be thriving? So we want to make sure that we try to make every investment we can to make sure that comes about.
Very good. Congressman, in December of 2019, you sponsored a bill, H.R. 5397, Rural Education Investment Act, which was designed to give students in rural areas the same opportunity as students in more incorporated areas of the country by improving the funding to our rural education system. At the time, you were quoted in the media having said all students deserve access to a quality education, regardless of where they live. A major part of that comes by educating and training highly qualified teachers. While Southern Illinois is blessed with many amazing educational professionals, rural communities face unique challenges in recruiting and retaining qualified teachers. I'm proud to lead this bipartisan effort to ensure that rural areas receive assistance and resources necessary to grow the next generation of America's leaders. Now, it is my understanding that this bill ultimately died in committee,
right,
which routinely happens in
right,
our political system. However, I felt it was important to bring it up because it speaks strongly to your commitment to supporting our teachers and the educational system for the future of our children. Can you share your thoughts concerning our educational system
Sure.
and the roles that both the state and federal government should be taking?
Right. Well, first off, the federal government should make the investment. In a perfect world, the state would be able to make the total investment that they need to do along with the communities. But remember, we kind of got an outdated system for funding our schools because it's based on property tax, and because of the unwillingness, I guess, to move off that in the state of Illinois. But through federal grants to try to encourage the best of the best teachers to get educated, stay with our local communities. And I'm going to tell you, teachers that do teach in small schools, if they have the rewards of a salary where they can make a living, they do want to stay because it does give them the opportunity. And you know, inner cities are unique. I'm not bad-mouthing inner cities, but rural schools are just fantastic places for teachers to raise their family, to have a good job, to possibly move through the teaching and then on into administration, to have all the hometown joy that we have, whether it's the football games on Friday nights or the basketball games that you have when you don't have COVID. But the most important thing is the rounded education and the quality of education that we can give to our children, that then they can, if they want to stay here, they can. But if they want to go on into another field, they can. One other thing that we need to do is we need to make the investment into the internet system and communication system that allow even our rural schools that quite often you can't quite get the internet capabilities that an inner city school and or some of our schools just in the local area can get because of the quality of that service. So we need to expand that out as well for the quality work, for the quality of education, and we've really discovered that during COVID.
In preparation for our discussion today, the Williamson County Republican Party reached out to several educators located within our county and asked them to submit a few questions. The first comes from an elementary school teacher who asks, considering the lasting effects of the coronavirus pandemic, which has resulted in many students being taught virtually, how are we supposed to bridge the gap when considering achievement tests for higher education, students who are going to be as much as a full year behind, and many who will be promoted to the next grade for participation rather than for mastering the necessary skills?
Yeah, and I wish I had a magic answer for that, but that's going to go down to the local school districts working with the local teachers to come up with the negotiations to figure out how to put the classroom into a place where they can receive the education that they need. We also have to be very, very careful to make sure that if someone is doing remote learning and they're in a location where they don't have an ability to hook up to the internet to do that remote learning, that we provide the opportunity to make sure to get them to a place and provide the opportunity. But that is a local control issue. The most important thing is that we as a federal government should help to finance and make sure that the money is getting available. But each school district is unique. What happens in Marion is completely different than what happens in Lick Creek. What happens in Cairo is completely different than what happens in Carbondale. And what happens in East St. Louis is completely different than what happens in Mount Vernon. So that's why it's important for the local control to occur during this time.
It's refreshing to hear a legislator recognize where the power of control needs to be between one branch or another. So you're actually purporting that it would go down to the state and actually inevitably end up at the local school district.
That's right.
So,
that's right.
The next question comes from a middle school teacher who asks, will funding ever be made available for educators and support personnel that is of a professional and family sustaining salary?
Depending on what district you're in, some are. Unfortunately, that falls back to what we said about Illinois being in a unique situation. They use a very outdated system to fund their schools. The question is, whenever I was, and this is not a federal issue, so I'm going to let you know that. And that's why it's important to understand that the federal makes their investment, but the question is, how is that money distributed? And then how do the locals generate enough money to offset what it is that they receive from the feds? The state of Illinois has used the property tax system for a long time, but they've also used what's known as a school aid formula. And the school aid formula, during my early years as state legislature, I think I've had a total of about 24 hours of total training, which is a lot on one issue, of how the school aid formula works. The school aid formula was brilliantly designed years ago. It takes your average daily weighted attendance calculated by now I'm going to go into too many details here, I know, but basically what it is it's supposed to level up. So the district that is in the suburbs that generates a tremendous amount of property tax wealth, the school aid formula is fed until it comes up to the same level. The problem is the school aid formula, to get that to occur correctly, the school aid formula has to drive the budget. But unfortunately, the state budget drives the school aid formula, so you never get that parity.
Very good. The next question comes from a high school teacher who asks, are programs being developed to increase funding levels directed at trade schools and vocational programs, since the reality is not every kid needs or wants to go to college? Absent access and funding for these alternatives, students might pursue college and likely get burdened by loans or end up with a degree that doesn't actually lead to an employment in their field of choice.
Let me tell you, that's a great question, and that is where we're working. Because we've come to the realization, finally, in education, that not everybody's going to be a doctor. Not everybody's going to be a lawyer. We have trades out there that we are short in. Welders, machinists, carpenters. And let me tell you that by working with our trade unions, as well as individual business owners, as a matter of fact, I'll explain how great this process works and how these are so beneficial. There is a Belleville business that their motto is they take little things to make big things, to make big things little things. They make rock crushers. So, but they can't find, or haven't been able to find, the people with the skills they need. So what they've done is they went to the local high schools in the area and community colleges where there are somebody who already has an interest in metals, whether it's welding or whatever. They work with them to provide for them a $25, starts out $25 an hour job to get them then their certificates in welding, then their certificates working with all of the different groups to get it done, then moving on to all of the programming and also the lathe work, the mechanical side as well as the electronic side, so that the skills, and they actually can climb to about $36 an hour top end. And what's really happening is, and the best example, because I was out visiting this, and this was just a month and a half ago, there's a young man that is 1 year out of high school who was raised by a single mom, who she worked several jobs just to make sure he was in school and everything like this. He's now the major breadwinner for the family, and he is so proud. And it's like, that's what the American dream's all about. And so yes, by making the investment in those areas and understanding, don't say, oh, well, this person isn't a lawyer, this person isn't a doctor. No, but this person can charge you $300 an hour to work on your car. So, this is the investments we need to make, because a balance of the American dream of people doing the jobs. Hey, if you're doing a job that you love, it's not much of a job it's a great job because you're not bothered by going to work every day.
It certainly changes the vision of what education in America should be.
Sure.
There is a lot of concern regarding our nation's healthcare system, with rising costs and an increasing demand for healthcare services causing delays in patients being seen. What options are available to stabilize the delivery and cost of these services?
Well, we had the option to get something done that we sent over to the Senate when we were in the majority. regardless of what was said about it, that was a very, very good starting place. But as it is now, what we're watching is we're watching the collapse of Obamacare. Yeah, let me explain that one more time. We're watching the collapse of Obamacare. Why? Because as the system was built, I believe the system was meant to fail. The amount of providers that can provide the insurance for affordable prices has reduced, and the amount of providers that are on the Obamacare system has now been reduced in the northern part of my district to only one provider. That's not competition. Without competition, you can't actually provide the providers that are necessary to make sure that people get the best quality health care they can for the most affordable price. That being said, we need to sit down and continue to work with our docs, with the people the providers of the health care coverages, so that we come up with the ideas. If they weren't happy with the bill we moved over to the Senate that then Senator McCain voted no on, which caused it to fail, then let's come back to the drawing board. But instead, just letting it continue to fall. I believe that the Democrats, when originally passing the legislation, knew, or many of them knew it was going to fail, so that way they could push for the single-payer system. The single-payer system will be the worst thing that could ever happen to this United States. I fought it tooth and nail and will continue to do that. We have to make sure that the promises made by Obamacare, that we change the language and change the law so that it goes back to where the promise that was made, affordable, portable, and deals with pre-existing conditions. And let me tell you that originally when we sent the bill originally in the House and some things got tweaked on it, and we were going to get it back in, and that was dealing with pre-existing conditions in the Senate.
While the free enterprise system of using insurance companies and healthcare provision was certainly not perfect, do you find it somewhat ironic that the government stepped forward with Obamacare, suggesting that the government could deliver those services better than free enterprise?
Right. And the best example of that is that I've never seen anything that the government sticks their hand in wholeheartedly and is better than what the private sector can do for the most part. Yes, there has to be certain guidelines. That's fine. That's fine. But the reality is in a world of competition, the more people you get into the marketplace, the better products that will be offered for the best possible price.
Scope of efficiency?
Scope of efficiency would be covered. Yeah, because the thing is, give me the opportunity to let people compete for my business, no matter what it is, and those people will do just that. They'll compete for my business. And there are some things out there that some people might not agree with, but our healthcare system is something that maybe we need to be able to walk through the door and be able to shop for the product and know what we're paying for when we go through the door.
At the time that Obamacare was coming to exist, I had an ironic experience. I had the circumstances arise where I was visiting Anderson Medical Center, their cancer center, not for myself, but for family. Mm-hmm. And I noticed during those visits at that time, this is pre-Obamacare, that there was a large number of people traveling to that facility, as well as presumably other facilities around the country, from outside the United States, because it was the pillar or the standard of care that they were seeking. I find it interesting that we then attempted to change that in an effort to better it when it already was the gold standard.
But yeah, it was the best in the world. And that same ideas and principles, whether it's on drug research, cancer research, new treatments for any disease out there, the more people who are pursuing a better way to treat these items will allow for an opportunity to set that gold standard. We've said off the start with Obamacare, people were leaving Canada to come to the United States to get their health care. Why? Because a controlled system couldn't provide the quality health care that they needed.
When it comes to jobs and economic growth, you have been a huge supporter and even championed legislation in support of small business. One of the most difficult situations business owners are currently experiencing is the difficulty of finding qualified individuals who are seeking employment. This was made even more difficult as the result of increased unemployment benefits supported by the federal government.
Right.
Can you describe balance in weighing the need for those who became unemployed through this pandemic to receive these unemployment benefits while still allowing the free enterprise system to take its course, and also address how important it is for the government to pace the retraction of those benefits as people return to work post-COVID?
Right. First off, most of the Republican members of the House, including myself, though we wanted to make sure that they were made better than whole, or made sure they were whole if you were unemployed because of COVID, the fact that you got $600 more, that came out of the Senate. And the House argued, you're going to pay people more to stay home than you are going to work. That's not probably a good idea. It passed. I voted for it. However, it was exactly what we said. As I toured my businesses, I've got voice after voice after voice. Mike, I want people to come in and work. But they're saying, hey, I'm making more money at home, man. So after it went out in the end of July, and the argument started on the fourth COVID bill, that's the argument that has existed between the Republicans and the Democrats, is that the Republicans are first off at zero, even to the point that we offered 200 in the Senate. They offered 200 in the Senate or 400 in the Senate. That's still a case where that may encourage, no, it will encourage people not to go back to work. We've got to get this economy fired back up. And the only way we get the economy fired back up is if you've truly been laid off from a job and work is not available, then yes, that's why unemployment is there. That's why it's there. But if we have open spots that say, look, we need employees here and we need you to come back to work, or we're willing to hire you, then we need to put people to work, and we need to make sure that the people understand that that's what we want to do. We can't have government programs that pay more to stay at home than it does to go to work. That doesn't make sense, and it won't last. It will collapse. And remember this, the important thing about this. I believe that in the first 3 COVID bills, we did everything we could to the best of our ability to find common ground to where we could help with as many people as we could, which PPP and all of this, to try to save many businesses. The thing is, we've got to make sure that whoever and whatever business or whoever is receiving that benefit because they suffered a loss from COVID, okay? Folks, we need to understand that whatever we do today is no longer affecting our grandchildren. It's affecting our great and great-great-grandchildren. Because we have to be able, and not only that, we swing this pendulum too far out of whack, and we put an unstable economy in place in the United States of America, and we seem vulnerable to someone who would be a nation that is more stable, then we are in danger not only of being attacked on our job markets, not only being attacked in the world trade type situations from our job being able to trade, but actually from offshore aggressors. We've got to remember that. And being elected to these positions, we've got to keep that always in our mind on who our enemies are. Even if we have to keep them at a place where we can trade with them, we have to understand that their interest is not always our best interest.
Well, that's a great segue into my next comment. I'd like to just kind of give you a little narrative here. The right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. These words were crafted by our forefathers and later ratified in 1791 as the Second Amendment of the Bill of Rights. These beliefs are a fundamental tenet of the Republican Party and a position that you, both as a member of the State House and as a member of Congress, have supported unwaveringly.
Yes.
How do we ensure that our Second Amendment rights are not infringed, and what are you and Congress doing to make sure that we are successful in defending our rights?
Well, first off, we have to do it on every level of government. We have to do it at the local level, we have to do it at the state level, and we have to do it at the congressional level. Each one of us take an oath when we're sworn into office to uphold the Constitution of the United States. I'll uphold the Constitution of the United States, except the parts I don't like, are the parts that I don't agree with. And, we've had a lot of time in courts actually figuring out exactly what our forefathers meant. And this is the important thing to remember, and that's what it is that we have to make sure that the elected officials understand this. And let me tell you, many of them don't. That wasn't for militia purposes. That was mentioned later in the Constitution. for militia purposes. That wasn't. It wasn't for hunting. It wasn't for protecting your home. It was so that if we have a government that goes awry, that we can defend ourselves against our government and rise up to make sure that our Constitution is held up to and for. People will go, oh, that's a radical stance. No, that's not a radical stance. That was a stance that our forefathers had when they put it in there, because they had watched what England had done to them, and they knew the importance. And let me tell you some of the important things that was been said by different leaders, even in the last 30 or 40 years. One leader from China said that, would you ever consider attacking the United States? He says, no, everyone carries guns. Folks, it is your right. That right shall not be infringed upon. There are things, and the Constitution, and it has been true in constitutional law, that there are things you can do to make that for the safety of yourself and others. A criminal can lose the right to bear arms. I do agree with that. But the question is, we've got to make sure, and you're answering your question, we've got to make sure we don't make things criminal that should never be made criminal. Just because I have a Ruger 10-22 rifle, it has a pistol grip handle on it, that shouldn't be banned because it's got a pistol grip handle. And the list goes on and on and on. In the State House, along with the federal government, as I watched people try to write language for gun control, no one should ever write language for gun control that does not understand guns. Right. And we have fought it in the courts. One of the best examples was in the state of Illinois with the city of Evanston, when they banned handguns. You couldn't have a handgun inside the city. I actually had to debate the city clerk who wrote that language, and she said that when I gave her the case of the guy with the nickel-plated 44 Magnum, Ruger 44 Magnum that was taken away and destroyed because he was going hunting, and they saw him in hunting clothes, and they opened his trunk and found it. They took it away and destroyed it. I told her, she says, well, you don't hunt deer with pistol. I said, oh, actually you do, and depend on the county. And she said, well, I don't know hunting laws. I said, precisely why you shouldn't be writing gun law. And so these are the people that you spend. We've got to try to educate them, but we also have to keep people in elected office that understand the importance of that Second Amendment, and not what it means for hunters, not what it means for protecting your home, but what it really means.
The 2020 general election is quickly approaching. We're down to a number of days until November 3rd. I'm very interested in your thoughts concerning the different categories of candidates that we have coming up in these elections. For example, in our local race here in Williamson County, we have a county commissioner, circuit clerk, coroner, and treasurer's position that are up for either re-election or new positions that are becoming contested for. So I'm very interested in your thoughts and comments regarding how important are those grassroots positions to our communities and to the political system.
They're vitally important, and here's the reasons why. One, it actually gets those people who have the ideas of a government that is local controlled in those positions locally to make sure they're wise in making the decisions, not having someone else from a statewide level or a national level come in and tell them how to do that. That being said, how well and how important is it when we look around this nation where people have made bad choices for their local elected officials, where the local elected officials don't understand the difference between law and letting people run rampant in the streets, burning down properties, destroying properties, physically attacking people, and thinking that the law is just a suggestion. You know, you've seen it all around this nation, and we know what our Southern Illinois values are. Those candidates have picked out a party, and that party has an anchor that says, we know that we are a nation of law. That's why these candidates are vitally important at the local level. They're all good quality candidates. And if they weren't, I'd say something. But the reality is, Williamson County has picked some wonderful county candidates on the Republican ticket. They do need to be elected. And if you don't want the turmoil that is existing in the rest of the world, you want to make sure that you grab hold of somebody that understands the base and anchor of their belief.
The other area of contention in our upcoming election is our judicial side. Now, this is an extremely important race on a couple of fronts. Two areas, the appellate court and the Supreme Court in Illinois, are both up for candidates that are seeking office. How important is the judicial side to our day-to-day lives?
Well, let me tell you, the appellate court is vitally important, that we have a true jurist, a judge that is proven. We have that with Mark.
You're speaking of Justice Mark Bowie.
Mark Bowie. I've known Mark since before he was elected the first time to his judgeship. He was elected at a young age. He's proven himself as just that. Not based on his political views, but based on what the law is how he decides his cases. And we have the same thing with David Overstreet. Now, let me tell you the importance of David Overstreet's seat. We know, as Deep Southern Illinois, those decisions that are made by our Supreme Court. Those of us who were around prior to Lloyd Carmeier, know how terrible it was in the state of Illinois, how the courts can so viciously hurt you on good legislation or really mess it up when bad legislation comes down. You need a judge that's like Lloyd Carmeier that will make those decisions based on what the actual law is. David Overstreet has proven himself. David Overstreet is not beholden to the trial lawyers out of the Metro East at all. That is vitally important for the people of Williamson County to understand.
Very honorable individual.
Very honorable individual.
Another area, as we move forward in this election cycle, and near and dear to your heart, of course, is the 12th Congressional District.
Right.
How is your campaign going?
It's going well. We're going to always run like we're behind. We are doing what we're supposed to do as far as raising money. We will be going up on the television or cable television, radio. Our signs are out. We are and have been doing every teleconference you can possibly imagine. It's just a unique race in comparison, and all of our races are. You know, they're unique in the fact that, for instance, my district in a normal political year has 64 parades. So far, the only parade I had was the one in Union County on Flag Day that we had 100 and some pickup trucks driving around with flags flying out of it and drove 70 miles. But that's the only parade we've had. Going out and going door to door. We do some that we can that follows the guidelines. We have a great group of volunteers. If anybody wants to volunteer, reach out. We put people, we have a tremendous amount of young students and young activists for the Republican Party and for my candidacy and other candidates that are using the phone lines and burning up the phone lines. We're using social media and doing what we're supposed to do. We're getting our message out.
How can those viewing this today, how can they help? How can they help your campaign, help elect these great candidates that we have in Williamson County and throughout Southern Illinois? What can they do to make a difference?
Every dollar helps, okay? And making that investment, every dollar helps. Reaching out to the candidate of your choice and asking them and their campaign operation, can I come in? Now, many of us are overlapping, okay? We end up calling for not only us, but other members and everything like that. Making sure that they're involved, that they're talking to now here's the big thing, all right? If you contribute, tell your neighbors you contributed. If you are in support of a candidate, if you go to the beauty shop, talk through your mask and tell how important it is to elect these officials.
Letting people know will make a difference.
You know, go to the coffee shop, do your social distancing, but let them know. Call your neighbor. It is truly, look, I can lay a brochure on somebody's door. I can run a TV ad. And that, if they don't know me, that's so-so. But if you know somebody and they come to you and I walk up to you and say, Jeff, I want to tell you something. Let me tell you about David Overstreet. Let me tell you about, and the list goes on and on and on and on. That means more than anything else that we can do, that we can spend dollars on.
What's your thoughts on the president and his reelection campaign? That's obviously America's going to be watching November 3rd.
Obviously the pollsters are saying, oh, well, he's down. He's up more now after the convention.
But we've seen how that played out last time. So we've been there.
Yeah, you got to look at that. The pollsters aren't. I actually talked to a professional pollster who said this. He said, Mike, you got to realize that we as pollsters, we have a set questions that we ask, and we ask them a certain way. I believe maybe we're asking the wrong question. Because in this hypersensitive world, quite often we will ask, are you voting for Donald Trump? Are you leaning towards Donald Trump? Are you not voting for Donald Trump? Are you undecided? He said, instead, we need to ask, do you think your neighbor's voting for Donald Trump? And most times you'll get the answer, yeah, I really do. My neighbor's probably going to vote for him. Are you? Oh, I'm not sure. Well, see, that's because this hypersensitive world that we live in, caused by the left, as Republicans and independents quite often just go, you know what, that's between me and that voting box. And I think that I have to wonder who voted for Donald Trump last time that's not voting for him this time. And, they had a few people say they did, but I'm not sure, because knowing people that have watched presidents over the years, which particular issue has he not delivered on, which he said he was going to deliver on, that he hasn't at least partially delivered on, even with the Democrats fighting him tooth and nail and trying to impeach him the whole time? So I really believe that this is all going to backfire. I also believe that the fact that we have the uprising that is occurring throughout this United States from Antifa and groups like that is telling the soccer moms and that of the suburbs and the suburban voter, you need to come back home for the safety of this nation and for the safety of your kids.
Thank you, Congressman Bost.
Thank you. Yeah.
I'm Jeff Diederich, chairman of the Williamson County Republican Party, with this series of Meet the Candidates, an interview with Congressman Mike Bost. Congressman, thank you again.
Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate it.